He had done everything right, reserved the best table, bought the designer dress, even rehearsed the lies he would tell his wife. Nathan Calloway walked into that charity gala with the confidence of a man who believed he controlled every room he entered. Brooke was on his arm, beautiful, quiet, a little mysterious, and he thought, "This is mine." He thought she was his secret, his escape, his toy. But the moment those jet engines screamed across the tarmac and the staircase lowered, Nathan Calloway's entire life detonated in front of 400 witnesses, and not a single one of them felt sorry for him. The night Nathan Calloway met Brooke Harmon, he was supposed to be at a client dinner in downtown Chicago. He had told his wife, Diana, that the dinner with the Greystone Development Group would run late, possibly past midnight. Diana had nodded, kissed him on the cheek, and gone back to her book. She had been doing that a lot lately. Going back to a book, back to her yoga, back to whatever corner of their enormous Lincoln Park townhouse she had quietly claimed as her own. They had been married 11 years. They had a 9-year-old son named Cooper. They had a cleaning lady named Rosaria, who came on Tuesdays and Fridays, and who, Nathan sometimes suspected, knew more about the state of their marriage than either of them did. The client dinner was real. Nathan sat through 2 hours of it, grilled salmon, Bordeaux that cost more per bottle than most people's grocery bills, and a conversation about commercial zoning laws that made him want to press his fork into his own hand just to feel something. By 9:30, the Greystone people had wrapped up, and instead of going home, Nathan found himself 3 blocks away at a wine bar called Ember, sitting alone at the counter, telling himself he just needed one drink before the drive back. He noticed her because she spilled her wine. Not dramatically, not in a movie way. She simply reached for her glass at the wrong angle, and a thin ribbon of Pinot Noir traced the sleeve of her cream-colored blouse. She looked down at it, made a small, private sound of exasperation, and then laughed. Not at Nathan, not for anyone. Just to herself, the way a person laughs when nobody is watching and life is being slightly ridiculous. Nathan handed her a napkin. She looked up. Her eyes were the kind of dark hazel that shifts between brown and green depending on the light, and she had the particular quality of someone who had learned to be still. Not shy. Still. There's a difference. "Thank you," she said. "Bad night?" he asked. "Average night," she said, which is somehow worse. Her name, she told him, was Brooke. She taught yoga at a studio in Wicker Park. She had grown up in Vermont. She liked hiking and bad television and restaurants that didn't take themselves too seriously. She asked Nathan what he did, and he told her he was an architect. And she asked the right follow-up question. Not, "Oh, like houses?" but "What kind of buildings do you love most?" And that, more than anything, was what kept him at that counter until midnight. He went home that night and did not tell Diana about the woman with the Pinot Noir on her sleeve. He told himself there was nothing to tell. He almost believed it. Over the following 6 weeks, Nathan Calloway became very efficient at lying. He had never thought of himself as a dishonest man. He had built his architecture firm, Calloway plus Reed, from nothing. 12 years of 18-hour days, of sleeping in the office during the project crunches, of turning down jobs that compromised his vision. He had a reputation in Chicago's design community for being ruthlessly principled. He was the man who had walked away from a $23 million hotel commission because the developer wanted to gut the historic facade. His business partner, Owen Reed, liked to say that Nathan had the spine of a structural beam. And yet, he met Brooke on Tuesdays and Thursdays when Diana thought he was at the office late. He met her on the occasional Saturday afternoon when Diana took Cooper to his swimming lessons at the Y. He learned Brooke's coffee order, oat milk cappuccino, 1 sugar, and the way she pulled her dark hair back when she was about to say something serious. He learned that she had a small scar below her left ear from a childhood fall, and that she had never once talked about her family. That last part should have registered. In 6 weeks of increasingly intimate conversation, and increasingly intimate everything else, Brooke Harmon had never mentioned her parents, never shown him a childhood photo, never referenced a sibling or a hometown friend. When he asked, she was fluid. "My family's complicated." A smile, a redirect. He accepted it because he was not in a position to demand transparency from anyone. What he did know was this: Brooke lived in a beautiful apartment in River North that she said she rented. The furniture was tasteful and minimal. There were no personal photos on the walls. She drove a pearl-white Audi that she said belonged to a friend. She wore simple clothes, but they were always the right simple clothes, the kind of simple that costs money. He noticed, but he didn't notice, if you understand what that means. He filed it under things I'll think about later and kept moving. The trouble with Nathan's lies was that they were building on a foundation of something real. He genuinely liked Brooke, liked talking to her, liked who he was when he was with her. Lighter, less managed, less like a man who had been quietly drowning for 3 years and calling it success. That was the dangerous part. Affairs of convenience are easier to exit than affairs of feeling. Meanwhile, at Callaway plus Reed, things were less stable than Nathan's public face suggested. The firm had staked its reputation on a massive mixed-use development in the West Loop, the kind of flagship project that either launches a firm into the top tier or buries it. They had won the commission 2 years ago. Since then, the original developer had pulled out due to funding issues. A new developer had come in with different demands. The city had changed 3 of the zoning requirements, and Nathan and Owen were sitting on $2.3 million of debt with a project that was 60% designed and completely stalled. Owen had started drinking at lunch. Nathan had started lying to his wife. Neither of them talked about what would happen if the project died completely. They talked about everything except that. It was Owen who first mentioned the Whitfield Foundation Gala. "We need to be there," Owen said, pushing a heavy cream envelope across Nathan's desk one Thursday morning. "Conrad Whitfield is going to be in Chicago for the first time in 18 months. Every major developer in the city is going to be in that room. If we show up, press flesh, make the right impression. Nathan, this could be the connection that saves us." Nathan turned the envelope over. The Whitfield Foundation Annual Gala for Architectural Innovation and Urban Development. Black tie, October 14th, the Langham Hotel. Conrad Whitfield was not a man you forgot once you learned about him. 71 years old, born in rural Pennsylvania to a plumber and a school librarian, he had built a real estate and infrastructure empire that spanned 4 continents. His firm, Whitfield Global Partners, had developed airports, hospitals, universities, and entire city districts across Europe, Southeast Asia, and North America. His personal net worth was estimated, depending on the publication, at somewhere between $14 and $22 billion. He was famously private, famously demanding, and famously allergic to what he called decorative architecture. He wanted buildings that worked, buildings that lasted. He was also, crucially, known to occasionally take on a promising mid-size firm as a development partner, absorbing their talent, their vision, their portfolio, and in the process saving them from obscurity or collapse. It had happened to a Boston firm called Archer & Finch in 2018. It had happened to a London outfit named Caldwell Associates in 2021. Both were now division studios under the Whitfield umbrella. Both were thriving. Nathan stared at the envelope. "Diana's not going to want to go," he said. "Then bring someone else," Owen said, not looking up from his screen. The sentence hung in the air between them. Owen did not look up. Nathan did not respond. But 2 days later, Nathan asked Brooke if she owned a gown. She looked at him for a long moment, that particular stillness of hers. And then she said, "What kind of event?" "Black tie, charity. The Langham, October 14th. Another pause. Something moved through her expression that he couldn't name. Then she smiled. "I think I can find something appropriate." He told Diana he was attending a professional event with a client. She said, "Fine, I'll take Cooper to my mother's." She didn't ask for details. He didn't offer any. There were two people living in a house, together, and communicating in the language of absence. What Nathan did not know, what he could not have imagined, was that after he left for his Thursday evening, late meeting that week, Diana sat down at the kitchen table, picked up her phone, and made a call. "It's confirmed," she said. "He's taking her to the Gala." A pause, then a voice on the other end, calm, measured, the voice of someone who is never surprised because they have already planned for every possibility. "Good," said the voice. "Let him." October 14th arrived, grey and sharp-edged, the kind of Chicago autumn evening that smells like the lake and old ambition. Nathan picked Brooke up at 7. She was waiting outside her building. She had never once invited him inside, and when he saw her, he actually stopped walking for a moment. She was wearing a floor-length gown the color of deep water, midnight blue, with no ornamentation, no sequins, no drama. It was the kind of dress that required the person inside it to do all the work, and she was doing it effortlessly. Her hair was down. She wore no jewelry except a single thin gold chain at her throat, and whatever was on the end of that chain was tucked below the neckline. "You look," he started. "Ready," she said. "Let's go." In the car, she was quiet, in a way that felt different from her usual quiet. He attributed it to nerves. First high society event. New environment. He patted her hand, and she let him, and said nothing. The Langhams' grand ballroom had been transformed for the evening into something that Nathan, despite himself, had to admire architecturally. Soaring, temporary columns wrapped in dark greenery, lighting designed to feel like candlelight at scale, a room that whispered permanence while being entirely temporary. About 400 people moved through it, developers, architects, city officials, foundation donors, a handful of media, the kind of room where every conversation was also a negotiation, and every handshake carried a subtext. Owen found Nathan within minutes of their arrival, already slightly flushed, a glass of champagne in hand. He stopped when he saw Brooke. "Owen Reed, my business partner," Nathan said. "This is Brooke." Owen shook her hand. "Brooke?" "Harmon," she said, smoothly. Owen nodded, already scanning the room for targets. "Whitfield's people are saying he might not arrive until 9. The foundation director, a woman named Patricia Stiles, is working the room. I've spoken to her twice already. She's the gatekeeper. If we can—" "Owen," Nathan said quietly. "One drink first." They found their table, table 7, round and beautifully set, with a small card that read Callaway plus Reed, Principal Architects. Brooke sat beside Nathan and accepted a glass of champagne from a passing server. She took one sip and set it down and did not touch it again. She was scanning the room. "Do you know anyone here?" Nathan asked. "No," she said. Then, after a pause, "Should I?" The evening proceeded the way these evenings always do. Rounds of polite conversation, the careful trading of business cards, the performance of mutual interest. Nathan worked the room with the discipline of a man who understood the stakes. He spoke to 3 developers, 2 foundation board members, and a city alderman who seemed genuinely interested in a sustainability project Callaway plus Reed had proposed for the South Side. Owen, by 10 o'clock, was on his 4th drink and becoming increasingly loud about their West Loop project in ways that made Nathan want to physically restrain him. Brooke stayed mostly at the table. She spoke when spoken to. She was charming in a contained way, the kind of charm that doesn't reach for you, but makes you reach for it. Several people asked Nathan who she was. He said, "A close friend," and moved on. At 9:45, someone near the entrance said something that rippled through the room the way a stone ripples water, circle by circle outward. "He's here." Except Conrad Whitfield was not, as everyone expected, coming through the main entrance of the Langham. The announcement came from Patricia Stiles, the foundation director, who approached the small stage near the back of the room with a microphone and a brightness that suggested she had been waiting for this moment all evening. "Ladies and gentlemen, I have a small change to our program. Mr. Whitfield has asked to make his entrance from the hotel's private terrace. As some of you may have noticed from the windows, his aircraft landed at Midway approximately 40 minutes ago, and he has a small presentation he'd like to make, outside, on the terrace, before we proceed with the award ceremony. Please follow the event staff." A murmur of intrigue moved through the room. 400 people, in varying states of curiosity, began moving towards the terrace doors. Nathan glanced at Brooke. She was already standing. "You okay?" he asked. "Fine," she said. Her voice had changed. It was flatter, more careful. The Langham's terrace overlooked the Chicago River, and on a clear October night, with the city lights reflected in the dark water, it was genuinely beautiful. But what commanded everyone's attention was not the view. It was the aircraft. A private jet, a Gulfstream G700, Nathan noted automatically. The kind of aircraft that costs upward of $75 million, had not, of course, landed on the terrace, but it had positioned itself at a private airport facility whose terminal, glass-walled and lit from within, was visible across a short stretch of distance from the hotel's elevated terrace. The aircraft sat on the tarmac, its engines winding down to idle, its navigation lights blinking red and green in the dark. As 400 people watched, the jet's door opened. A staircase extended. A figure appeared at the top of the stairs. A man, heavy-set, with white hair and the slow, deliberate movements of someone who has never needed to hurry because the world waits for him. He descended the stairs with 2 aides flanking him, and a car pulled up, a black Escalade, and he got in, and the car began moving in the direction of the hotel. The entire display was, Nathan thought, a masterclass in theatre. It was designed to remind everyone present of exactly who they were dealing with. He glanced at Brooke again. She was not watching the car. She was watching the jet, and she had gone very, very still. He was about to say something when his phone buzzed. "Owen, he's coming into the hotel through the lower entrance. We need to be positioned. Now." Nathan touched Brooke's elbow. "Come on," he said. "This is the moment." She turned to look at him, and something in her eyes, some door that had been closed, opened briefly, and he saw something in it he didn't understand. Not nerves, not excitement. Something closer to grief. "Nathan," she said quietly. "What?" But she pressed her lips together and shook her head. "Nothing. Go meet him. I'll wait here." "Brooke, I'm not going to leave you on the terrace. I'll be inside in a moment," she said. "Go." He went. He told himself he'd explain everything to her later. The business situation. Why this meeting mattered. Why he had really brought her here. He told himself he'd be honest with her. The way people tell themselves things when they are already on the other side of honest. Conrad Whitfield entered the ballroom at 10:17. Nathan had positioned himself near the center of the room with Owen, both of them holding drinks they were not drinking, both of them watching the entrance with the focus of athletes before a race. Patricia Stiles was with Whitfield, along with 2 aides and a woman Nathan didn't recognize, tall, blonde, somewhere in her 40s, with the expression of someone who spent her professional life managing very large egos. Whitfield himself was smaller than Nathan had expected from photographs. Compact, white hair. He wore his tuxedo the way old men wear formal clothes, like it was simply the appropriate tool for this environment, no different from a work shirt. His eyes moved around the room constantly, not anxiously. Cataloguing. 30 seconds, Owen murmured beside Nathan. When Stiles finishes with him, we move. Nathan nodded. He was calculating angles, timing, the right words to open with, not the desperate pitch of a sinking firm, but the confident introduction of a creative peer. He had rehearsed it. He was halfway through rehearsing it in his head when the room went quiet. Not all at once, table by table, conversation by conversation, a quietness that spread from the terrace doors inward like a slow tide. Nathan turned. Brooke had come back inside. She was walking across the ballroom, steady, unhurried, the midnight blue gown moving with her, and she was walking directly toward Conrad Whitfield. Nathan watched, confused, as Whitfield looked up from his conversation with Patricia Stiles and saw her, and his entire face changed. The professional mask, the careful neutrality of a very powerful man in a public room, cracked open like plaster in a house fire. What was underneath it was unmistakably, shockingly, just a father. "Sweetheart," Conrad Whitfield said. Not quietly, not privately. In a room that had gone almost completely silent, 400 people heard it. Brooke walked into his arms. He held her for a moment. This man worth $20 billion, who had walked off his private jet 20 minutes ago. And he held his daughter with both arms, the way parents hold children they have been missing, and he pressed a kiss to the top of her head. Then he held her by the shoulders, at arm's length, and looked at her and said, "You look exactly like your mother." Nathan Calloway stood in the center of the ballroom and felt the floor of his life drop away. Owen said something beside him. He didn't hear it. It took Nathan approximately 4 minutes to get his legs moving. 4 minutes in which the room buzzed back to life around him, the whispers starting at the edges and moving inward, people pulling out phones to search, to confirm, to tell someone. Did you know? Did you see? That woman is his daughter, while he stood holding a glass of champagne like a man who had just been told the building he designed had collapsed. Patricia Stiles, Nathan would learn later, had not been told about Brooke's presence. Stiles's visible shock was genuine. She kept glancing between Whitfield and Brooke with the expression of a person trying to rapidly revise an entire evening's programming. When Nathan finally moved, it was because Brooke saw him coming. She watched him cross the room. Her father was speaking quietly to one of his aides, giving her a moment, and Brooke looked at Nathan with those hazel eyes, green in this light, not brown, and waited. He stopped in front of her. "Harmon," he said. The word came out flat. "That's not your name." "It's my mother's maiden name," she said. "It was her name before she married my father." "Before she married," he stopped, restarted. "Your father is Conrad Whitfield." "Yes." "Your father is Conrad Whitfield, and you have been—" He lowered his voice, though the trembling in it was not controllable. "You have been letting me believe you're a yoga instructor in Wicker Park." "I am a certified yoga instructor," she said, "and I do teach at a studio in Wicker Park. Both of those things are true." Brooke. Her name in his mouth sounded different now, heavy with a meaning he was still computing. "Why? Why did you— What is happening right now?" She looked at him for a long moment, and in that moment, in the way her expression moved through several things before settling on something honest and tired, he understood that the answer was not simple, that the answer was going to take the rest of the night and possibly the rest of his life to fully comprehend. "There are some things you need to know," she said, "about your firm, about the West Loop project, about my father, and about your wife." The last 2 words hit him like consecutive blows to the chest. "My wife," he repeated. "You should sit down, Nathan." He didn't sit. He stood there while she talked, and the party moved around them like a river around 2 stones, and by the time she had said what she had to say, the champagne in his hand had gone warm and flat, and the ice sculpture across the room had half melted, and Nathan Calloway was looking at the woman he thought he knew and seeing, for the first time, who she actually was. Brooke Whitfield, her real name, she confirmed, was Rebecca Whitfield, though she had gone by her middle name, Brooke, since childhood, was 29 years old. She was Conrad Whitfield's only child from his second marriage to a woman named Claudette Harmon, a Vermont landscape architect who had died of cancer 7 years ago. After her mother's death, Brooke had spent 3 years traveling, teaching yoga, and deliberately, by her own choice, not her father's, living below the radar of the Whitfield name. She had a master's degree in urban planning from MIT. She had completed a fellowship with a sustainable development nonprofit in Nairobi. She was not hiding from anything. She was choosing herself. She had come to Chicago 8 months ago, and she had not come by accident. My father's firm has been evaluating Callaway plus Reed for 16 months, Brooke said, her voice low and even. They had moved to a small anteroom off the main ballroom. Heavy curtains, quiet, a place where conversations like this could happen without an audience of 400. He does this when a firm interests him. He sends people in before he ever makes contact. Architects, planners, evaluators, people who study the portfolio, the reputation, the financial state, the culture of a firm. He was investigating us, Nathan said. Evaluating. There's a difference. I don't see the difference right now. She let that pass. When the report came back on Callaway plus Reed, my father was very interested in the West Loop project. Not in its current state. He knew it was stalled. He knew about the debt. He knew about the original developer pulling out. He was interested in the vision, in what you had designed before the project became compromised. Nathan was quiet. He wanted a partner, Brooke said. Not a vendor, not a subsidiary, a genuine creative partner for a development in Philadelphia. A mixed-use civic campus, education and housing and public space. The largest project his firm has undertaken in North America in 15 years. He needed someone with your specific sensibility, your record on community-integrated design, the way you think about how buildings relate to the people who actually live inside them. He could have called my office, Nathan said. He could have, she agreed. But my father doesn't make phone calls to firms that might be 6 months from bankruptcy. He makes investments in firms that have already demonstrated they can survive. The room was very quiet. So he sent you, Nathan said. Brooke was silent for 3 seconds. When she spoke, her voice was careful in a way that, for the first time, sounded costly to her. I asked to come. I had read your project proposals. I had read the Southside community design work, the 3 public library renovations, the essay you wrote for Architectural Review in 2022 about buildings as ethical objects. I wanted to see if the person matched the work. And did you plan to— He stopped. The question was too raw to finish cleanly. Did you plan to sleep with me? No, she said, and she held his gaze without flinching. I didn't. That was not part of any plan. That was— She paused. A complication. He looked at her for a long time. You said, he said slowly, that I need to know something about my wife. Brooke's expression shifted. This was the part, he realized, that she had been carrying the whole night. Diana has known about my father's interest in your firm for 4 months, she said. She was approached, quietly, through an intermediary, and she agreed to provide certain information about the firm's financial state, your current clients, the status of the West Loop project, information that my father needed to finalize his evaluation. Nathan's mouth had gone very dry. Diana, he said, as though testing whether the name still belonged to the woman he had been married to for 11 years, has been providing intelligence about my company to a billion-dollar development conglomerate. Yes. For 4 months. Yes. Why? The word came out quietly, but what was inside it was not quiet. Brooke met his eyes. She was told that if the evaluation was positive, if my father decided to move forward with a partnership, your firm's debt would be restructured, the West Loop project would be completed under the Whitfield umbrella, and Callaway plus Reed would effectively be saved. She was given that choice: participate and potentially save your firm, or stay silent and let it collapse. The silence in the anteroom was the loudest thing Nathan had ever heard. She did it for the firm, he said. She did it for you, Brooke said, and for Cooper. He sat down. He drove to Diana's mother's house in Evanston at 11:30 at night. He sat in the car outside for almost 10 minutes, in the driveway, in the dark, looking at the lit windows of his mother-in-law's house where his son was presumably asleep and his wife was presumably reading or watching television or doing any of the normal things that normal people do at 11:30 on a Wednesday when they don't know their husband is about to knock on the door. Except she did know. When Diana opened the door before he knocked, when she stood there in a cardigan and jeans with a mug of tea and her expression set in the particular way it gets when she has already decided how a conversation is going to go, he understood that she had been waiting. "Come in," she said. Her mother was not visible. The house was quiet. Diana led him to the kitchen, and he sat at the table where he had sat dozens of times over 11 years of holidays and dinners and post-Christmas card-writing sessions, and she sat across from him and put down her mug and waited. "How long have you known about Brooke?" he asked. "Known that she was Conrad Whitfield's daughter," Diana said. "About 3 months. Known that she existed?" A pause. 4 months. "And you said nothing?" "What should I have said, Nathan?" Not sharp, genuinely asking. "You were having an affair. I found out. I was devastated. I am devastated." Her voice did not break, but the steadiness of it cost something. He could see the cost. "But at the same time, someone reached out to me and told me that despite everything, despite what you were doing, despite the firm being weeks away from a financial crisis you still haven't told me about, there was a path forward, a way to save something. You should have come to me." "You weren't coming to me," she said. "You hadn't been coming to me for a long time." He had no answer for that. Diana wrapped her hands around her mug. "I want you to understand something. When the intermediary first contacted me, a lawyer named Thomas Revere, based in New York, I thought it was a trap. I thought someone was trying to compromise us for a competitor. I did 3 weeks of checking before I agreed to provide any information. I spoke to an attorney of my own. I made sure that what I was giving them was information they could have gotten through due diligence anyway. I was not selling you out, Nathan. I was buying time. Time for what? Time for this." She gestured at the air between them, vaguely. "For the evaluation to be completed. For the decision to be made. For you to be standing in a room where Conrad Whitfield could see who you are." Nathan looked at his wife. 11 years. He had thought he knew every expression she owned, every register of her voice. He was discovering tonight that he had been wrong about that. "Did you know she would be there?" he asked. "Tonight." Brooke. Diana was quiet for a moment. "I suspected she might be." "You suspected that the woman I was," the word got tangled, "seeing was Conrad Whitfield's daughter. And you let me walk into that room with her." "I let you," Diana said, with a precision that was not cruelty, but was honest, "face the consequence of your own decisions." Nathan did not sleep. He checked into a hotel downtown, the Kimpton Grey, a room on the 14th floor, with a window that looked out at the city he had spent his career trying to make slightly more beautiful. And he sat in the chair by the window until the sky went from black to grey to a thin, watery blue that didn't really deserve to be called morning. He thought about Brooke, about the woman he had thought he was saving himself with, who turned out to have been, in some complicated and non-predatory way, saving him, about the chain around her neck, which she had explained, briefly, was a small compass that had belonged to her mother, a tool Claudette Harmon had used on her landscape surveys and had left to her daughter, who wore it everywhere because she said it reminded her that there was always a direction, even when you couldn't see it. He thought about Diana, about 11 years, about the version of himself that Diana had seen going under and had, without asking permission, without announcing it, quietly reached out to catch. Not because she had forgiven him. She had not said she forgave him. She might never say it. but because Cooper existed, and the firm existed, and she had apparently decided that some things were worth saving, even when the person at the center of them was behaving badly. He thought about his son, asleep in a house in Evanston, who had no idea any of this had happened, and whose entire life would be shaped by decisions being made in rooms he wasn't in. At 7 in the morning, Nathan called Owen. "How much of last night did you see?" he asked. "Enough," Owen said. He sounded hungover and shaken. "Is she... Nathan, is she actually—" "Yes." A long silence. "What does that mean for us?" "I don't know yet," Nathan said, "but I'm going to find out today." Conrad Whitfield's assistant, the tall, blonde woman from the previous night, whose name turned out to be Margaret Hollis, and who had the energy of someone who had seen every version of every situation and was not impressed by any of them, called Nathan at 9:15 in the morning. "Mr. Whitfield would like to meet with you," she said. "Today, if possible. He's flying out tomorrow evening. The meeting would be at the Whitfield suite at the Langham at 11 o'clock. Nathan said yes. Then he called Owen again and told him to be there. They rode up in the elevator together. Nathan and Owen, both in yesterday's clothes because neither of them had gone home, and neither of them spoke because there was nothing to say that covered the situation adequately. Conrad Whitfield met them in a sitting room overlooking the river. He was in a dark suit and no tie, a cup of coffee at his elbow, reading something on a tablet that he set aside when they entered. Margaret stood near the door. "Calloway," he said, standing to shake Nathan's hand. His grip was firm but not performative. He shook Owen's hand. "Read. Please sit down." He did not mention Brooke. He did not mention the previous evening. He was, Nathan realized, a man who had learned to conduct business in the aftermath of personal events, because personal events happen all the time, and business does not stop for them. "Let me be direct," Whitfield said. "I don't enjoy circling things. Your firm has the most interesting architectural philosophy I have encountered in North America in the past 5 years. Your debt situation is manageable. Your West Loop project can be salvaged, not in its current form, but the underlying design principles are sound, and I have a development team that can restructure it with your creative input. More importantly, I have a project in Philadelphia, 3.8 million square feet, 15-year build timeline, for which I have been unable to find a design partner whose values align with my intentions for the development." He looked at Nathan, not at Owen, at Nathan. "I want that partner to be you," Whitfield said, "not your firm as a vendor. You as a named creative director of the Philadelphia project, with Calloway plus Reed retained as the architectural lead. Your debt absorbed, your equity protected, your name on the building." Owen had gone completely still beside Nathan. Nathan could feel it, the physical effort of a man trying not to react to a sentence that had just saved his life. "What are your terms?" Nathan asked. Whitfield almost smiled. "I was told you'd ask that first." "Who told you?" "My daughter," Whitfield said. "She said you were the kind of man who asks about the structure before he admires the facade." Nathan was quiet for a moment. Is she part of this conversation?" Whitfield considered the question with a weight that suggested it was not simple for him either. "That," he said, "is between you and her. My professional interest in your work is separate from whatever else has occurred. I find it easier that way." He slid a folder across the table. "My team has prepared preliminary term sheets. I'd like a response within 2 weeks. Margaret will coordinate." Nathan looked at the folder. He looked at Conrad Whitfield, the plumber's son from Pennsylvania, the builder of airports and universities and city districts, the man whose daughter wore a compass and taught yoga and had spent 6 weeks being Nathan Calloway's carefully maintained secret. "Mr. Whitfield," Nathan said, "I'm aware that the circumstances of how your firm came to evaluate mine are," he searched for the word, "unusual. I want to be clear that I intend to conduct any partnership with full transparency. If we move forward, I will not be a man who has things he's hiding." Whitfield looked at him for a long moment. "Good," he said. Then we're starting from an honest place. He picked up his coffee cup. That's rarer than it should be. He texted Brooke from the lobby of the Langham. Can we meet? Not for any business reason. Just to talk. She replied 20 minutes later. Millennium Park. The Bean. 2 o'clock. He was there at 1:55. She arrived at 2 on the dot. Out of the gown, back in her regular life, dark jeans and a worn leather jacket, and her hair pulled back, the compass chain visible at her throat. She looked, in the October afternoon light, exactly like the woman who had spilled Pinot Noir on her sleeve at a wine bar in Wicker Park, and laughed to herself about it. He had rehearsed things to say. None of them seemed right now that she was in front of him. I owe you an apology, he said. For which part? For treating you like something that belonged to me, he said. For not asking the questions I should have asked. For assuming that what we were was simple. That you were simple. She looked at him levelly. I wasn't entirely honest with you either. You were more honest than I was, he said. Every time. I just wasn't listening. They were quiet for a moment, standing beside the great silver arc of Cloud Gate with its distorted reflections of the skyline, tourists moving around them. What happens now? He asked. With us. She looked at the Cloud Gate reflection for a moment. Her reflection in the curved silver surface was elongated, wavering, like something seen through imperfect water. I don't think there is an us in the way you mean, she said. I think there was something real. I'm not going to pretend it wasn't. But you have a marriage to figure out, and a son, and a firm, and a life that needs to be repaired, not replaced. Repaired. And you? I have my own life, she said, which I am good at living. A pause. I'm going back to Philadelphia. I've been consulting with my father's team on the Civic Campus project for 6 months. That's actually why I was in Chicago. The Callaway plus Reed evaluation was something he asked me to contribute to. So you were always going back. I was always going back, she confirmed, and there was something in the way she said it that was not cold but was final, the kind of finality that respects both people enough to not dress itself up as something kinder. He nodded. Will I see you again? He asked. She looked at him. For a moment, the stillness she carried was completely open, not guarded, not managed, and he saw clearly the thing she had never quite said out loud, that it had been real, that it had mattered, and that she was choosing not to follow it because the timing and the circumstances and the state of his life made it something that couldn't grow cleanly. You'll see me in professional contexts, she said. If the partnership moves forward, I'll be involved with the Philadelphia project. We'll be in the same rooms. We'll have conversations. A slight pause. That's not nothing. No, he said. It's not nothing. She held out her hand. He shook it. Professional? Clean? The handshake of two people who have decided to be honest with each other about what is possible. She walked away across Millennium Park, her jacket pushed out by the October wind, not looking back. He stood there for a while. The partnership agreement between Callaway plus Reed and Whitfield Global Partners was signed on November 19th of that year, in a conference room in Philadelphia. The West Loop project in Chicago was restructured, rebranded, and completed 3 years later as one of the most discussed mixed-use developments in the Midwest, a project that won 4 major architecture awards and was cited, in the citation for one of those awards, for its rare integration of community-centered design philosophy with large-scale urban function. Nathan's name was on the building. Owen Reed retired from the firm 2 years after the partnership was signed, gracefully, on his own terms, his equity bought out at a number that surprised him pleasantly. He moved to Tucson and started teaching studio architecture to undergraduates, which, by all accounts, he was unexpectedly good at. Nathan and Diana did not divorce immediately. They did not pretend nothing had happened either. What they did over the course of about 8 months was something harder and less cinematic than either separation or reconciliation. They talked. They went to counseling, twice a week, with a therapist named Dr. Adele Frost, who had an office in Lincoln Square and a reputation for sitting with difficult silences, until they cracked open and became honest. Diana told Nathan things she had been storing for years. Nathan told Diana things he had barely admitted to himself. The affair, Brooke, was addressed directly, not as an abstraction or an emotional distance thing, but as a specific failure with a name. Diana cried. Nathan did not try to manage her crying. Dr. Frost said nothing for 4 minutes and let them sit in it. What survived was not what they had before. It was smaller in some ways and larger in others. The way a room looks different after you take out a wall and discover the space that was always on the other side of it. Cooper grew up not knowing the details of that autumn. He knew his parents had gone through a hard period. He knew they had worked at it. He grew up in a house where honesty was not always comfortable, but was always present, which turned out to be the best and only thing his parents actually agreed on giving him. As for Brooke Whitfield, Rebecca Brooke Whitfield, though she remained Brooke to everyone, she spent the next 5 years as the lead urban planner on the Philadelphia Civic Campus project, which became, when it opened in phases, a landmark of integrated public-private development, written about in 3 books and taught as a case study at Columbia and the LSE. She co-authored a paper with a British urban theorist named Dr. Simon Aldgate on the ethics of community-first design that Nathan read twice when it was published and sent her an email about, to which she responded with a thoughtful 2 paragraphs and a recommendation for a reading list. She did not teach yoga in Philadelphia, but she kept her certification. She told an interviewer once, a long-form piece in Metropolis magazine, that she had spent her 20s learning how to be still in her body and her 30s learning how to be still in the world, and she hoped her 40s would be about learning to be still in a room with another person without either of them feeling the need to fill the silence. The interviewer asked if she was married. She smiled and said, "Not yet." The compass on its thin gold chain was visible in the photograph that ran with the piece. Conrad Whitfield attended the Philadelphia groundbreaking ceremony. He was 74 by then, moving a little more slowly, but with the same cataloguing eyes. He stood beside Nathan during the remarks portion of the ceremony, both of them in hard hats, looking at the footprint of what was going to be built, and Whitfield said, not to anyone in particular, just to the air, "You know what I respect most in construction?" Nathan waited. "What holds," Whitfield said. "Not what's impressive. What holds?" Nathan looked out at the foundation survey stakes driven into the Philadelphia earth. He thought about buildings, about marriages, about the difference between a structure that looks permanent and a structure that actually is. "Yeah," he said, "me too." The thing about secrets is they have mass. You carry them around thinking they're invisible, thinking nobody can tell, thinking you've distributed the weight so evenly across your life that none of it shows. And the whole time, the people closest to you can feel it. They can feel the slight lean in your posture, the way you answer your phone in another room, the particular quality of the silence when you come home. Nathan Calloway thought he had a secret. Brooke Whitfield thought she had a secret. Diana Calloway thought she had a secret. And Conrad Whitfield, in his quiet way, had known about all 3. The charity gala at the Langham became, in later years, a story that Nathan told carefully, never as comedy, never as farce, always as the story of the night he was handed back his own life and given the opportunity to decide, for the first time in a long time, what kind of life it was going to be. Not the life he had been performing, not the life he had drifted into by accumulation, a life he chose, with the people he chose it with. He kept a small architectural sketch on his office wall, not his work, but Brooke's. She had drawn it in the anteroom of the Langham on a cocktail napkin while they were talking, almost without meaning to. A rough, quick sketch of a building that was mostly windows, mostly light, with the simple note underneath in her handwriting. What's inside should be visible from outside. He framed it. He looked at it every day. It seemed like good advice for a building. It seemed like better advice for a life. This story is a reminder that the life you think you control is often the life that is most out of your hands. Nathan built structures for a living and couldn't see the cracks forming in his own foundation. Diana loved a man who wasn't looking at her and chose to fight for their life anyway, quietly, on her own terms. Brooke wore someone else's name for 6 weeks, not to deceive but to discover, and what she found was more complicated than either of them expected. And Conrad Whitfield, who built things on 4 continents, understood something most of us only learn the hard way. What you leave behind in a person matters more than what you build in concrete and steel. If this story moved you, made you think, made you feel, give it a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. The next story is already waiting, and trust me, it's even more unbelievable than this one.